opportunity to speak with you about some current research that I'm engaged in on state building, and particularly why it's such a difficult problem. Social planners often refer to problems as wicked problems, by which they mean that there's no easy solution. Right. They're wicked not in any normative sense, and I want to try and avoid much of that in our discussions today. But they're difficult to solve. At the core of our current state building problem is what I call the state builder's dilemma. And it is this dilemma that makes the problem of state building so difficult. And the dilemma is the following. States that are sufficiently motivated to spend the blood and treasure and time that's involved in building a state in some foreign land will typically have some sort of political interest within that country. We don't do state building capriciously. We don't go overseas to countries in which we don't have interests. We are mostly concerned about state building in those countries in which the United States has some deep national or economic interest that's motivating its behavior. And when we go overseas to engage in state building, we tend to promote leaders who are sympathetic to our interests. We want to sort of build within the state some leader who's going to be able to enact policies that are consistent with our interests in that country. But when we promote these, what I will call loyal leaders, we undermine the legitimacy that they may acquire in their own home societies. This in turn undermines the state building process, produces undemocratic leaders who are not supported by their own populations, and thus we fail to build consolidated and effective states in those very countries to which we're purported to be engaging in state building.
Hello, Makadi, Linjani. Hello, Makadi, Linjani. Today is Wednesday, the 25th of August, 2021, and today's watch list is an American gangster, an American liberalist, a tree hugger, you know what I'm saying, a pan-democracy guy. We can't say he's a pan-Africanist, far from it, but shout out to an American government official and a diplomat serving as the 71st United States Secretary of State since January 26th of 2021. Yes, comrades, today we are going to be talking about Secretary of State Blinken. Blinken today. This individual represents all the foreign policy interests of the United States globally, including us here in little old Zimbabwe in the corner of Southern Africa. So we had to talk about this individual. We cannot call him a cadre. He is far from being a cadre. He is a patriot, but his patriotism is based on the interests of the United States of America. He is an immigrant, but he is a true patriot to United States of American interests. But this man influences so much of what is going on here in Zimbabwe that we cannot continue watch list and talk about so many people Waribama sanctions list, Anata Guire, ED, without talking about this guy. There are several United States officials we are going to discuss, but this one is the top of the list. This guy is more important to Zimbabwean interests than Biden. If you had not been listening to our podcast, comrades, go back to our podcast. We told you at the beginning of the year that Biden achaisa foreign policy yake on remote control for 2021-2022. He's going to be on remote control. His biggest issues are domestic policies right now, right? Which is why you see him flip-flopping as we are speaking right now. Kabul yagaroa, no, not Kabul, but Herat in the Gizan province were taken over by the Taliban a few weeks ago, around the 12th of this month, as we are discussing this podcast now. Right now, as I'm speaking to you, I don't know whether or not they've taken over Kabul. Chances are they are Taliban. So we told you this at the beginning of the year, that Biden would have foreign policy yake on remote control. It's just it's on autopilot. Basically, Biden's foreign policy is on autopilot. Now, If you are in America, then it's a different conversation. You are in Africa, we're in Zimbabwe. First thing you need to understand is that apana difference. There is no difference between a Democrat and a Republican when it comes to the foreign policy interests based in Zimbabwe. Once you understand that, then you follow this at the Revolutionary Star. So here we go. Who is this individual, Anonzi Stephen Blinken?
This last thing I'll say is this. We all, in diplomacy or in anything else, kind of bring our own backgrounds and our own stories to the table. That's how we're formed. That's how we think about issues. And, everyone has their own personal stories and family stories. In my case, I come from a family that has, in very, very recent generations, people who were refugees or immigrants to this country. And I suspect for many of you, it's exactly the same thing. I had a grandfather, my father's father, who fled pogroms in Russia at the turn of the last century, coming here to find a better life. And he was welcomed with open arms and built a better life and contributed back. A stepmother who fled the communists in Hungary many decades later also came to the United States, wound up here, was welcomed, found a better life, and contributed to the country. And then finally my stepfather, and my stepfather and Alicia's father were friends. He, like Elie Wiesel, had the most searing of experiences. He was born in a town called Białystok in Poland. And of the 900 children who he was in school with, he is the only one to have survived the Second World War. But he survived through the concentration camps. And for 4 years, he was in Dachau, Majdanek, Auschwitz, you name it. So at the very end of the war, as the Allies were advancing from one side, the Russians for the other, there was a death march out of the last camp that he was in. And he and a few of his friends made a break for it, which on one level was crazy because, of course, the Germans immediately started firing at them, but somehow they made it to a forest. And they hid in the forest. And then, a couple of days later, they heard this rumbling sound. And my stepdad looked out from where he was hiding, and instead of seeing the dreaded Iron Cross or swastika on a tank, he saw something different. He saw a 5-pointed white star. And he ran to the tank in the middle of this battle. And he got to the tank, miraculously, and the hatch opened up. And a very large African-American GI looked down at him. And he got down on his knees and said the only 3 words that he knew in English that his mother had taught him before the war. God bless America. The GI lifted him up, lifted him into the tank, into, figuratively speaking, the United States, and into freedom. That's the country that I grew up with. Those are the family stories that I heard of my grandfather, my stepmother, of my stepfather.
Dara Blinken, Mr. Blinken, Secretary of State Blinken. First, he served as the Deputy National Security Advisor from 2013 to 2015, and then as a Deputy Secretary of State from 2015 to 2017 under President Barack Obama. Pause and hold. Why is this important? Tarisai Madetsai. First, it was under the Obama administration. Angari Deputy National Security Advisor. This individual, who is the current Secretary of State, was a Deputy National Security Advisor from 2013 to 2015. He was that time GNU. That means he was involved on the policy and operational, because my deputy do notabas. Most of the heavy lifting, drafting policy, micromanaging of what's going on, and making sure you know what the hirings and firings in different areas of the world. I don't know if say Jinotagira from the Deputy National Security Advisor Shidzika. So this individual was a Deputy National Security Advisor from 2013 to 2015. Relating to Zimbabwe, this means Dara Blinken was involved in ECOPAC, had been involved prior to becoming Deputy National Security Advisor. That means from 2008 and prior, he had also been involved in my American advisors, vakatumidzirwa kuSouthern Africa kuzobatsirana tsvangira na biti and the other people forming our constitution that we currently have here in Zimbabwe. Mudara, you know Zim inside out. Brugwaresa ari kuziva. We are not giving this as props. We are just telling you it as it is. This Mudara knows it. We have not yet gone to what his biases are. We are still understanding the individual. Remember, the watch list is about understanding the individual and not putting our biases on this man. So, 2013 to 2015, Deputy National Security Advisor. Right. Don't forget, he's under President Barack Obama. He was also Deputy Secretary of State from 2015 to 2017. I want you to match the trajectory, comrades. These are very important. So from 2013 to 2015, Angari ku National Security Advisor, Angari ku State House. Angari like a President's office here in Zimbabwe. Therefore, President's office must see 10 military attaches, communications, all that. That's what he was from 2013 to 2015, right? After he had been done that, they moved him from national security. Then he went to Secretary of State. Secretary of State, Angari Deputy Secretary. Anga Chikoro Deputy Secretary. Already, that should already tell you this guy is very good as a manager. Drafting, hiring, firing, logistics, operations. Mdara anoziva. Moving laterally from Deputy National Security Advisor to Deputy Secretary of State means this guy was on point. And he was being groomed already under the Obama administration. That's number one. Let's move on. Kanaman Bata Pap. If you have caught that one, let's move on. He then went on and he advocated for the 2003 invasion of Iraq while serving as the Democratic Staff Director for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee from 2002 to 2008. Note, 2003 invasion of Iraq. Remember Afghanistan, we had a podcast we did about Afghanistan. Now we're not talking about 2003. So a few years after the United States under Bush have invaded Afghanistan, this guy is advocating for the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and he's serving as the Democratic Staff Director for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, right? Anga Atanga in 2002 under this job, and he ended 2008 when Obama became elected. So remember, comrades, cadres, tererai madates. Dara yakapinda pabasa ku Senate Foreign Relations. Ndo yakatibudisira zidera. This is the Senate committee that brought us Zidera. Mdara Blinken served as the Democratic Staff Director for the Senate Foreign Relations from 2002 to 2008. Time SAI, when all this is going on, he was there. At the same time, when this is going on, he's one of the people who advocated for the 2003 invasion of Iraq. No one wakafurira Biden could push and agree with Bush to invade Iraq at that time. So again, take note of the dates. They're very important to who we know this man is when we start talking about his biases and who he is, right? 2003 invasion of Iraq, he advocated for it. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, no committee, not Zidera. Right now, it's currently has an Cory Booker and everything. These are the people who are going as ZANU-PF and the government motto. These are the people who are not beating love, right? When they fly to the United States before they go to the State House, right? They pass through the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and they hobnob with these people, right? This is where it is. So he was picked up by Obama. Now, if you're looking at the years from 2002 to 2008, that means he was one of the guys on Obama's committee who was advising. You can already tell, because right after 2008, Mdara then ended up getting promoted, right? 2008, first administration, he wasn't there. 2013 to 2015, then he was made Deputy National Security Advisor. Note, who is Blinken? Blinken is a Harvard guy, through and through. Just from the little that I've already explained to you, you should know this guy is a Harvard guy. 1980 to 1984, he was at Harvard. He studied in social studies, and then he co-edited the Harvard's daily newspaper, the Harvard Crimson. Harvard Crimson, comrades, is top-notch. Very top-notch. Anything about editing my newspaper, usually, besides Harvard, in America, people don't pay attention. But only Harvard and the top schools, if you're editing anything, even if it is the lacrosse newspaper, they give it a lot of props. So this is where it is with this man Blinken. He entered Columbia Law School in 1985. He earned his JD in 1988. And then he practiced law in New York. He also practiced in Paris. He's worked with a lot of people. He started his political career with Michael Dukakis, the Democratic nominee in the 1988 United States presidential election. He helped craft U.S. policy on Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the nuclear program of Iran. Comrades, this is Blinken.
Today we'll be considering the nomination of Anthony Blinken to be President Biden's Secretary of State. The problem I have with this nomination is that for decades now we've been at war in Afghanistan. The war is now called the Forever War. People lament that it goes on so long, and people say, how could it possibly keep going on? 65 to 70% of the American people, 65 to 70% of American veterans who served in that theater say the war is enough. We should end the war in Afghanistan. How does it go on? We've got a new president. Are things going to change? Here's the problem. Why do the wars continue? Why do the wars in Syria and Libya and Somalia and Afghanistan continue? Because the more things change, the more they stay the same. Mr. Blinken has been a full-throated advocate of military intervention in the Middle East for 20 years. We're fooling ourselves if we think we're going to get a new policy. We're going to get more of the same. In his hearing, I said to him, the problem isn't that we don't compromise or that we don't have bipartisan consensus. The problem is we have too much bipartisan consensus for war. For 20 years, he has advocated for military intervention. He advocated for the Iraq War, as did the president. President Biden was also an advocate of the Iraq War. Now, later on, they say, well, the war wasn't that great of an idea, but we were lied to by George Bush and the intelligence. And I'm willing to admit there's some truth to that. But there's a bigger lesson here. The lesson is that regime change doesn't work. That you often get unintended consequences, and you often get the opposite of what you think you're getting. They said, we must go to Iraq to topple Saddam Hussein because he's a terrible dictator. Well, yeah, he was a despot, a dictator, an autocrat, wreaked havoc on his people, probably gassed the Kurds, many different horrible things. And yet, when it was gone, what did we get? We got a power vacuum, we got more terrorism, we're back in there 10 years later because the government's non-functional. And what's the final result? Iran is stronger. What's everybody talk about? Iran. Why do we worry about Iran? Well, because we toppled their biggest adversary. We used to have a balance of power between Iraq and Iran. Despot on one side, despot on the other, but at least a balance of power. But who is Iran's best ally now? Iraq. Think about it. Iraq is allied with Iran. Iraq is also allied in many ways with Russia, as well as us. But they've also asked us to leave. They're like, oh, thanks for our freedom, but y'all can take off now. But who supported the war? President Biden, Anthony Blinken. We're back where we were 20 years ago. Now, like I say, there's some retrenchment, there's some backing off of the position, but I don't hear from either President Biden, candidate Biden, or from Anthony Blinken that regime change is wrong. Now, if it were wrong, you would expect there was a learning from the Iraq War, and they would say, okay, now when we're in charge, we won't do the same. But it turns out, when we had an Obama administration with Blinken and the other military interventionists in a supposedly progressive administration, we got more war. They went into Libya. But once again, the same sort of idea, the idea that regime change works, and that we...
So Mdara Blinken has helped craft U.S. policy on Afghanistan, Pakistan nuclear program. After leaving government service, he moved into the private sector. He co-founded WestX Advisors, a consulting firm. He supported the military intervention in Libya with the supply of weapons to Syrian rebels. He's worked with Biden closely. He and Biden, they'd always been very close. When it came to Israel and the arsenal for the Iron Dome interceptor missiles around 2014, the Israel-Gaza conflict, Mdara yanga ripo full throttle. Now, comrades, Zandurgu Taura is follow the dates. 2011 military intervention in Libya under Obama and the supply of weapons to Syrian, he supported that. That's number one. So that's our previous, what I'd been saying. Number two, 2014 Israel-Gaza conflict, right? Again, I apologize to those who do not follow Shona or the Vele speakers. I truly apologize. But I'm trying to get the succinct facts, so at times I may deviate from English. 2014 Israel-Gaza conflict that happened, right? He was the Deputy Secretary of State during that time. Apologies. He was the Deputy National Security Advisor at that time. So, just after when that is happening, that's when they laterally move him from being Deputy National Security Advisor to Deputy Secretary of State in 2015. I want you to follow the years. Follow the years, comrades, so that you get to know what Murumu Yanofunga say. Before he even became Deputy National Security Advisor, he had been already pushing for the Israel-Gaza conflict in 2014 to be, not the Israel-Gaza conflict, he had been pushing for the military intervention in Libya in 2011. This guy is a hawk, but he hides behind being a tree hugger. So, we are getting to the crux of the matter. Come Biden Apinda, he's now in charge, he's been the president, hooray, what, here we go. January 26, 2021, this year, Blinken was then confirmed in a full Senate by a vote of 78 to 22. Apinda Panyanga. Again, you see the numbers. Remember what we said in all our podcasts. Whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, foreign policy agenda haichinji zokumanya. Foreign policy agenda for the United States does not change drastically depending on who is in charge. If you see right now with the Afghanistan policy, Biden is moving from Trump's policy and he's just working with what Trump had already started. Trump right now is criticizing Biden on details. He's not criticizing Biden on the fact that he's continuing with his policy. Note this. No matter how much these Americans criticize each other, this American president was dumb, this American president was smart, they are all the same, comrades. They are all the same. So, February 2021, January 26, 2021, Blinken is confirmed in the full Senate by a vote of 78 to 20.
In terms of what we set out to do in Afghanistan, we've done it.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken today defended U.S. policy in Afghanistan and its repercussions.
Like it or not, there was an agreement that the forces would come out on May 1st. Had we not begun that process, we would have been back at war with the Taliban.
American diplomats are now at the heavily fortified airport, setting up a temporary embassy with limited staff, trying to evacuate as many as 10,000 civilians. Even the dogs are getting out.
This is President Biden's Saigon moment.
During a briefing for lawmakers today, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Mark Milley said al-Qaeda could now reconstitute itself faster than the original estimate of 2 years.
They totally blew this one. They completely underestimated the strength of the Taliban.
House Democrat Jason Crow, who serves in Afghanistan, called it heartbreaking.
And I'm calling on the administration to put as much combat power in the ground, hold that airport as long as we possibly can, to allow as many of our friends to get out.
Now about...
Ndara Apinda. Gizi. We did a previous podcast when we were talking about Afghanistan and regime change. And we were trying to tell you what regime change is. This was an introductory podcast we did. We are now coming into the crux of the matter. These people were the people who, the pistons behind regime change. This is one of the pistons. February 2021, Mdara Blinken, having spoken to President Ashraf Ghani of Afghanistan, started voicing support for Afghan peace negotiations with Taliban Islamist rebels. When we are saying rebels, this is wording used by international media from the United States side. In this support, Blinken reiterated that the United States' commitment to a peace deal that includes a just and durable political settlement and a permanent comprehensive ceasefire. Comrades, this is February 2021. Mdara Blinken apina panyanga. He's been voted into power January 26, 2021. February atomhanya nebhora. Munhu akapusha for invasion in Afghanistan. Munhu akapusha for invasion in Iraq. All of a sudden masamba achinja. The tea leaves have changed. He's now supporting a withdrawal. And in this withdrawal, he still claims that the Taliban are Islamist rebels. But he then goes on and he reiterates that the United States is committed to a peace deal that includes a just, not the keywords, this is quoted, a just and a durable political settlement and permanent comprehensive ceasefire. This is February 2021. My comrades, we are right now in August 2021. Taliban is on the move. Yakabata Gizan province. Yagarova Herat last week, Thursday the 12th. Last week, Taliban is got 65% to 70% of Afghanistan. So what the fuck was he talking about when he was talking about commitment to peace deal that includes a just and durable political settlement and a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire? Hapanas. These guys were already saying, yeah, well, we got to get the fuck out of here, dog. We got to get the fuck out of here. There ain't nothing going on. This is February 2021. So here's where we're coming through. If Mdara Blinken had already been on this tip February 21 before Apinda, that means during Biden's time, while Biden was still vice president, they already knew what was going on. They already knew. Let's go deeper. Zimbabwe. But now we say who this guy is. This guy is the current Secretary of State. This guy is a hawk. But we want you to see the same conclusion we see before we talk to his subordinates. His subordinates don't know Zimbabwe motto more than him. Right? He's just the face, the figure of what US foreign policy is going to look like under Biden. So what does that mean to a person who doesn't understand the innuendos? Is if you are a hip-hop artist or you are a rapper and you, for example, Nas wears his chain, he wears a Biggie chain. Ludacris, when Ludacris comes out, he has got a different type of chain. The Baby, who's really crazy right now, he's got a comical chain. Jay-Z, he uses the old school chains that he wears from that look like just a regular chain, nothing fancy, and it's a gold chain. The ones that Cool G rap and all those old school rappers used to use. Why am I mentioning hip-hop, right? If you see the way a rapper expresses themselves by the chain they have, you know that that's a chain. So when a rapper's chain is stolen, you know it really hurts because that's his expression. That is what Blinken is to the United States. He is a chain. When you see him, he represents what the United States at that current time feels like. So for Biden, whenever Biden sends Blinken to Zimbabwe, he's sending his chain. This is my chain. You get what I'm saying? This is what Blinken is. He's like a rapper, a hip-hop rapper's chain. So if you don't understand what that chain means to the rapper, then you've lost the whole game. You've lost what it is. So who is Blinken? Let's talk about it. Blinken flip-flops. We've already stated this one. Besides flip-flopping, what else does he do?
Thank you so much, Boholo. My name is Mandatum Lojwa, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Secretary. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I'm a 2018 alumni from the Regional Leadership Center in South Africa, where I was in the civic leadership track. So as someone that's very passionate about democracy and governance, I see that there's a lot of violence in countries like Zimbabwe where they kidnap and attack opposition and civil society leaders, the insurgencies in Mozambique, for instance, and the ethnic conflict in Ethiopia. So my question really is about the position, the policy position of the United States where unresolved violence is concerned, past and present.
So this is something that we have to and we are paying attention to. Security concerns as well as to democracy and human rights. And unfortunately, what we've seen is backsliding on both fronts in a number of places across Africa. And I have to say that we're concerned about these trends, both rising insecurity and also diminishing adherence to democratic standards and human rights. Ultimately, inclusive, accessible democracies are the most crucial thing to moving countries away from cycles of violence and onto a path of peace and stability and development. What we found through experience and what history suggests is that the countries that enjoy transparent, accountable governance and that deliver services for their people face fewer social grievances and ensure that the public actually is invested in building a stronger future because they can see it, they can feel it. So if governance, if democratic governance is able to effectively deliver what people need and give them a voice in the system, that is ultimately the way that you deal with violence, you prevent it from erupting in the first place, and you strengthen democracy and human rights. So we're very much committed to working with partners to advance peace and security in Africa. In the short term, sometimes that looks like security partnerships, conflict mitigation support, and diplomatic advocacy on human rights. Ultimately, I think the most important thing that we can do is to help countries, where possible, strengthen their democratic institutions, strengthen the ability to deliver progress for people, economic growth, and that's the real foundation that we need to put in place. But that takes time. And in the meantime, some of these programs and partnerships to deal with the immediate challenges are what's most important. Baholo?
Let's talk about something here. Blinken spoke with interim president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido, whom the Biden administration will continue to recognize as the country's head of state, and not Nicolas Maduro. Regime change. Number one. Let's go further. So February, out of Afghanistan. April 15, 2021, Blinken then goes on and he meets with U.S. military and diplomatic personnel following the Biden's administration announcement of a 2021 withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. He says the decision to withdraw from Afghanistan was made in order to focus resources on China and COVID-19 pandemic. Lies. U.S. foreign policy doesn't change, comrades. It evolves. It does not change. Apana U.S. president who veers off course. Why is this? We're going to go deeper into why does United States foreign policy not change drastically when presidents come into power. That's a different podcast, right? But for now, this is what Blinken said. This is in April. Now, late April 2021, Blinken also went on and he denounced the sentencing of a Hong Kong pro-democracy activist, Jimmy Lai, Albert Ho, and Lee Cheok-yan, among others, for their roles in the 2019 Hong Kong protests. This was against China. Remember, this is April 2021. Late. Early April, we are moving out of Afghanistan and we are pivoting towards China. Right? And then later on in April, after they announced that, that's when he starts denouncing what? Hong Kong protests. Right? You can Google this up, comrades. But what we are asking is to follow the dates, the years, so that you can see who we are talking about. Right? Same time this is going on, Blinken was also consistently criticizing the Erdogan administration, which is based in Turkey, as being authoritarian. Right? He's also indicated a desire to welcome political refugees from Hong Kong. He stated that the Biden administration was committed to Taiwan's defense if China ever decides to invade Taiwan. He's actually said that. So, this is who he is. Why are we mentioning Mkoma? First and foremost, Mkoma Blinken, because Mkoma is older than us here, the revolutionary stuff. He is a hawk, but he's a democratic hawk. He's not a dove. For those who are into politics, you know the difference between a hawk and a dove. This person has got no problem with using military force to get their way. He said it over and over again. He's got several interviews where he's actually said that the State Department seems to use force more because he has said this in several interviews. where he says the U.S. State Department at times encourages the army to come in so that they show intimidation and then they quickly pull out. Right? He has a certain train of thought that the Biden and the Obama and the Clinton administrations agree with. He's been in the system. These are the people who you say career politicians or career diplomats or whatever you want to call them. He's in the game. Right now, he's in charge. Our first podcast at the beginning of the year, we told you that Biden has foreign policy on autopilot. Uyu ndiye boss wedu in Zimbabwe right now. This may be difficult for you to understand. It may actually be a bitter pill for any Zimbabwean listening to this right now, but it is what it is. Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and then Mukuru National Security Council, Biden. Those three people are more important than Biden himself, because they actually manage the day-to-day activities of things happening in Africa when they relate to the United States position or the hegemonic control of their interests within Africa. Finish and clap. For them to have a substantial hold over Africa, that's when Congress is used to enact certain laws and mechanisms in order to lock things in. That's why you find, as always, buying airline tickets to go and beg or lobby Congress. It's a nice system, comrades. We are not criticizing the United States. They did. And they are a bigger power than Zimbabwe. There is no way in hell we will ever become a superpower, comrades. But we want to be able to survive in our own little space. For us to do that, we need to understand what we are dealing with. And what we are dealing with right now is a hegemonic power that is about to finish off what they started. And what they started was regime change. This person is a staunch supporter of human rights, nation building, democracy. All the things this Mudara has been in support of are, if the people are not listening to us and they are not being diplomatic, send him a soldier. This guy is just like Chiwenga, who we've been criticizing, who the international community were criticizing. Why did Chiwenga send soldiers out into the streets when people were protesting, right? Or during the elections. Exactly the same thing that Chiwenga did. Blinken is very capable of doing that too. He believes that. His record shows for himself. He's been involved in all the fuck-ups that the United States have done globally. Afghanistan, Arimo. Pakistan, Arimo. Nuclear program, Iran, Arimo. Syria, Arimo. Libya, Arimo. Come on, gentlemen. This is who is the current Secretary of State. Israel-Gaza conflict. He's there. He's there. This man has been involved with all the things that the United States has fucked up globally. He's there. But we here as outsiders are saying he fucked up. But Ikogo, he is not fucked up. He's been actually doing his job. And this man is very good at his job. And what is his job? His job is to maintain the United States interests globally for a period that exceeds when he is alive. He is looking at a 50 to 100 year propagation. So we can never say this guy is a dummy. No, this guy is actually doing his job. And he's doing his job very well. Which is why right now the current president of the United States, Joe Biden, has put him as Secretary of State, and Secretary Foreign Policy is, for all intent and purpose, on autopilot. DR Kurana Foreign Policy. But don't forget his argument. This guy had been groomed before that. Not what we said at the beginning of our podcast. 2013 to 2015, he was Deputy National Security Advisor. 2015 to 2017, then he became Deputy Secretary of State. Deputy Secretary and below, these guys are not there for TV. They are there for drafting, policy, operations, human resources, logistics. This guy knows what he's doing. So, why are we talking about Comrade Blinken? He is affecting policy that's going on here in Zimbabwe as we speak. He will be there as we go into the elections. He is following everything that's going on here. He is pro-regime change. When we are saying regime change, he may not actually come out and want to get rid of ED, but he is not on ED's side, he's not on ZANU-PF side, he's not on the local people's side. He's looking at a stable type of environment that encourages capitalism and American interests. Whether that is BT who gives him that answer, whether it is Chamisa who gives him that answer, whether it is Chiwenga or ED who gives him that answer, he doesn't care. What he needs is to get to that. And the quickest way to get to that is to get to the Zimbabwean people. Because a typical American is very arrogant in believing that Takawapa, KFC, and McDonald's, they will be happy because we are giving them choices. An American believes that capitalism brings choices. Once we give people choices, they will automatically want democracy. People have rights, people have choices. So, he's using that pretext to embed American interests. Why? Because the people who are currently capable of bringing all the choices in the world are Americans. Atina basa kana wakawa jaira sadzeyo. So what kana wakawa jaira sadza? Chimborova lasagna. Wakamborova iriza lasagna ireyo. Chimbodla. Imbodla lasagna umboona yakambira sei. This is the United States. So what if Sadza has managed to keep your whole family living up to 90 years? Muchidya mpunga nemunga ne sadza ye brown chichichi. So what? Chimborova rice, chimborova escargot. Chimbo sampler. Sampler good life. This is good life. That is what Biden, Blinken, the United States represents. It's about you being tempted to experience any. This is why Taliban is fighting them. Yes, Taliban may seem backward as hell, but they want their values. Let us decide, Tega, Sewan with Taliban, when we want to evolve and change. We don't need an outsider who's a Caucasian to come and tell us that democracy is what is right. But it's not about him, it's his biases. This man is biased against where it is, and he is a proponent of regime change. And note from our previous podcast, regime change is not a negative connotation. It's how you perceive it or how media then tells it. Regime change just means what it means. Regime change. You're changing one system for another. But the United States and Western powers have managed to make it look like democracy is the only way for you to go to heaven. Kuti uone Mwari, uone Jesu, you need to be a Democrat. You need to believe in human rights. You need to believe in democracy. This is the world we are living in. Unfortunately, a lot of us will die. A lot of people had happy lives under Chaka Zulu. Personal democracy. I mean, we had grandfathers of ours who lived up to 100 years, but they didn't know that voting would maybe extend their lives or make it better. But our point here, comrades, is that you need to know Secretary of State Blinken. We're going to then go deeper, mention his subordinates. But no team here Biden, it's background. Each own is a government, you do moto. Because one, he tried rapprochement and he didn't kiss ass. That was a mistake. Not kissing ass means that they are now going to go harder at him. That means they are going to start supporting a lot of other democratic institutions there. It's only a matter of time before the United States realize that they've made a mistake and they are going to start bribing security forces. They are going to start trying to flip securocrats in the Zimbabwean government to go to opposition. I'm surprised they haven't done it yet. It's only a matter of time. They've realized they made a big blunder with Zimbabwe under Mugabe. They thought once they got rid of Mugabe, everything would crumble. When it didn't crumble, they are now faced with the situation when they realize, oh, we need to destroy this party or weaken it considerably, which means we need to flip as many army personnel, intelligence operators as we can. So guess what that means, comrades? We are looking at a situation where we will be still under sanctions, but there's going to be a lot of people being flipped or bribe could join this side. It is what it is. We're a small country, and it's not even going to be a blip on their radar foreign policy wise. Zimbabwe is not that important for the United States to take that much time. That means you are going to be getting case officers who are just trying to, gain a name for themselves, a promotion, which if I was Zimbabwe could also post to a better posting for Europe. But unengwatanga your service as a CIA agent here in Zimbabwe, office desk in Africa. But it means a lot for us here who are locals here in Zimbabwe. That's why I have to mention this as Super Cabral. This is a very sobering podcast because it goes too deep and it won't be able to be covered. I'm going to be mentioning several other of his subordinates who we need to watch out for. You can't blame these people. They are patriots to their country. They are only doing what their human interests and their nation's interests dictate them to do because they are patriots for their country. Where we make a mistake as Africans, Anabiti, Nana Chamisa, and opposition, is we think that they are on our side. I would prefer BT negotiating something when he knows that he has an exit plan. Because sooner or later, but tiriwe mudanga. Tese tinotungana muno musemumbe, but tiriwe mudanga. Opposition has not yet understood that. Until we get to that point, we will continue being used as Africans. And you cannot blame the United States because they are there to secure their interests for a long time. They have been taught over and over and over again, don't be like Rome. Don't be like Rome. The fall and the decline of Rome, don't be like Rome. They are the modern day Rome. Why would they just walk into a situation where they collapse as a superpower? As you would. So, comrades, this has been a very sobering podcast for the watch list because these things actually affect us on a day-to-day basis. I only skated on a small part of it. We will go deep as we go in, but it does not make sense talking about local actors if we don't tell you who the real Madara are, who control what we are doing. Right now, the big dog who controls what's going on in Africa is Mdara Blinken. It's not ED. It's not UN. It's not Biden. Biden is busy worried about Oregon, California, Maryland, the local congressional seats, senatorial seats, Trump, COVID. Biden anabasa ne Zimbabwe. Blinken does. Blinken anebasa. Because Blinken wants to write a book. Blinken adakuswe kuma archives United States Library. Blinken is looking at his legacy because he was the son of an immigrant. So he's looking at his legacy. Dear Boswell. So we're going to look at his subordinates as we come in during the end of this year. This has been Comrade Super Cabral. I apologize for the stuffy nose. It's cold season, so got a bit of a cold. We are hoping I used to COVID, you know how it is, but it is what it is. This has been Comrade Super Cabral. Roger out.